BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Phil Goodlad and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. The news, the views, the analysis you need from our beautiful game. It's Friday, the morning after the night before, as we look back on a phenomenal result for Scotland in Greece.
As Scott McTominay is indeed going to get the chance to give Scotland the lead from the penalty spot. Up he steps and scores!
Phenomenal because Steve Clarke's side had to weather the pressure in the second half, but it puts them in the driving seat in the Nations League playoff. And there's plenty of action on the domestic front as well, starting at Firhill tonight.
There it is, the opening goal! Wraith Rovers 1, Dunfermline 0.
No! Absolutely top draw for Thistle!
Can anyone stop Falkirk in the Championship? And as if that wasn't enough, on Saturday...
Momentum's a ridiculously difficult thing to measure in football. But I think that's what we've got. We've got a bit of togetherness. We've found a structure in our team that works for the personnel that we have.
There's also the Women's Premier League Cup final as Grant Scott's Hibs take on Rangers.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
I'm delighted to say the morning after a Scotland game where we're all happy and sun-kissed, as it's going to be the warmest day of the year, that John Walker, the coach and analyst, is with us to tell us what went right for Scotland in that first half and what maybe we need to improve on for the second half. John, morning to you.
Morning, how's it going?
I'm very well, thank you. As is our next guest, a 24-hour ray of sunshine. Gemma, former Scotland goalkeeper, played 200 times plus for the national side. So when it comes to talking about all things Scotland, she talks and we listen. Gemma, morning to you.
Good morning. Every Friday, you raise me up, Phil, with your introductions.
Raise me
No,
up.
I knew. Oh, no, I knew that was going to happen.
Do you just then, having been raised up, just listen on repeat to the Scottish Football Podcast all day?
Just to your dulcet tones, Phil.
Yeah. It's a pity we weren't recording the pre-chat amble before we were recording this.
Mm-hmm.
You could have been listening to that quite a bit. Listen, let's start. First things first, on the table, a win is a win is a win. It was a pretty tough crowd last night, I think, fair to say, on the outskirts of Athens. We had the battle noise, we had the battle pressure, we had also to battle some idiot with a laser pen, and fair play to Scott McTominay for slotting away that penalty. And yet, Gemma, I'm wondering, in the old adage of it being a game of two halves, were we lucky to get away with the win?
I don't really believe in luck, to be honest. I think if you think about that game, we've been in the end of games like that the wrong way. If you're asking me, was the penalty fortunate? Yeah, I think it was. In all honesty, if you were objective in it, you could have said that Scott McTominay could have got a yellow card and it could have been a free kick the other way because he's tripped over the ball. But I don't care. I will take it. And, we did have some other chances in that first half. You kind of felt in the first half that we needed to take one of them. It might be one of those games where we needed a bit of a buffer because of the Greek side's history at that ground. I mean, it's as you say, it's an absolute fortress for them. They've hardly lost in there, twice in 4 years before last night. But when you play in a playoff game, the most important stat is the one at the end of it, which is the scoreline. And to go away from home and to get a 1-0 victory and withstand what they withstood in that second half, I think if you were to ask Steve Clarke before the game, would you take this? He'd bite your hand off for it.
John, you're the coach, you're the analyst, so you will talk and we will listen. What was the difference between Scotland in the first half and Scotland in the second half?
To be fair, because the match finished so late, I've not been able to watch the game back yet, obviously because we record so early. I'm unsure as to what happened between the 15 minutes that finished the first half and the second half. Karetsis obviously came on, the young teenager that everyone's kind of raving about, but he's up against Andy Robertson, a Premier League and Champions League winner with 50 Scotland caps, so it's not like he's coming on against an inexperienced left-back who he's able to take advantage of. But I do think he seemed to be the catalyst for it. They gave him loads of the ball. He was creating loads of chances. He created the best two chances with crosses to the back post. they were absolutely dominant. I just can't tell if we just stepped off because we had the 1-0 lead or if they did get a foothold in the game. But either way, that was the Greek side in the second half was the one I expected to see from minute one and the one I expect to see at Hampden, which is the thing that does concern me a little bit when I look.
Although they were really good in the second half, and the stat that it's the most shots in 18 years that Scotland have faced with 24. I think it was 27 back in 2007 with the McFadden game against France. Facing 24 shots, but there was only one on target. And for all Greece's pressure last night, it was mainly crosses coming in. And for Grant Hanley and for John Souttar, they just seemed quite comfortable throughout much of the second half.
That was the thing that I kind of said before we started recording. I watched John Souttar loads. I'm a massive fan of John Souttar. I think if John Souttar hadn't had the injuries, he'd be playing in the English Premier League at a very good level week in, week out. Grant Hanley, an astonishing stat about Grant Hanley is that Grant Hanley's now started one less game for Scotland than he has club football in 110 available club matches. So Grant Hanley's form last night's in the last couple of games, to be fair, is absolutely sensational for the lack of games he's getting to play in the lack of max practice. If you're crossing balls into the box for Grant Hanley and John Souttar, you're playing into their hands. But I do think the introduction of Pavlidis late on changed that a little bit. That looked a little bit. He was picking up a lot of good spaces. He scored both the goals against England from crosses. I think Pavlidis will start. I think Karatzis will start. I think you'll see a Greece side that will dominate most of the game. And I think Steve Clarke had talked about the back five not being reverted back to because they hadn't had a lot of training sessions because they travel and playing early on the Thursday. I'm curious if it'll be a 5-4-1 trying to defend that box because I think he's probably concerned about that second half. So that'll be interesting to see how that changes. But I would expect Karatzis and Pavlidis will come into that starting 11.
Gemma, I always like the morning after a Scotland game when Tom English, one of his columns drops. He's quoting Smoking Joe Fraser this morning. Joe Fraser's famous quote where he says, I love boxing like a hog loves slop. And Tom English writes here, Grant Hanley, he loves defending like a hog loves slop.
A comment on that, shall I?
I'll just leave that there.
No, and you're right, and in terms of the match last night, you asked the question what was different. I think two things were different. I think one, Greece didn't show up as much in the first half, so I think Greece weren't particularly good in the first half, and Scotland capitalised on that in terms of counter-attack play, which they did particularly well. I think in the second half, with the introduction of a couple of the players that John mentioned, Greece stepped up the tempo, which forced our midfield to drop deeper. And when your midfield drops deeper and the second ball comes out, you're not in the right positions to collect that and recycle it. So that's probably where you saw the change. But you're right, defensively, Craig Gordon didn't really have a save to make. And that's a lot to do with the concentration and the focus of the entire team, not just the defence. Yes, a lot of crosses were coming in. They were getting a lot of balls in the wide areas. But in terms of that penetration through the middle part of the team, we didn't really see much of that whatsoever. And when you're in a situation where a team is dominating the ball, and you put into the context of the environment they're in, which is their fortress, where they've got a psychological advantage that they pretty much never lose. It's all about focus and concentration, and I think Scotland did that particularly well. And you're right about Grant Hanley. Like I must admit, I'm one of the ones when I see Grant Hanley in the team, I'm like, a little bit. And I think a few people are like that. But the guy's resilience is something else. He just, I think Tom's column, he mentions he just soaks it up, doesn't he? And we were talking about, well, people shout for the fact that you want people that are playing week in, week out. Well, actually, maybe you don't want people that are playing week in, week out. You want people who are the freshest and ready to play for their team. And Grant knows what his job is when it comes to Scotland. He's really, really clear, and he's proven that he can do that time and time again. As has Anthony Ralston, who not playing regularly for Celtic, but he comes to Scotland. Yes, he's made one or two mistakes, but he bounces back for that. And there's something to be said, right? And I say this a lot about myself. There's something to be said to be consistently above average in a space, because a coach can rely on you. And that's what you see with Steve Clarke. People will often say, oh, this player's in form and that player's in form. Steve Clarke wants to build a solid foundation of with players that he knows that he will get consistency from, because then he can add the flair in further up the pitch. And I think with Grant Hanley, and I think with Anthony Ralston, adding Robertson, adding John Souttar, who's had his injury problems this year, you've got a level of consistency, not necessarily flashiness. I don't think we need flashiness there. We just need people that know how to do their basic tasks of defending.
And you know something? It's maybe not fashionable in this modern day of slick passing defenders and, playing around the 6-yard box. For a Grant Hanley type, his job is to win the ball and give it to somebody that can do something with it. And long may that continue, because he plays the role really well. You mentioned Craig Gordon. You always know when Craig Gordon's had a quiet night, because his hair at the end of 90 minutes looks exactly
perfect,
the same.
isn't it?
Quiff. I mean, I don't know what sort of hair cream he's wearing, but that is impressive.
It's styled to perfection, is it not?
Did you do your hair before you played for Scotland? Because I can't think of anything worse, having a clutch in your hair for 90 minutes.
What's a clutch?
A clutch, like cream and gel, and just when you put your hand on it, it's like clutch.
So the major issue I had is I had long hair, so it was keeping it out of my eyes. That was like most players that have long hair. There's very few that I know of female players that like to wear their hair down when they play. The one or two wear a band, but most of us, it's just to get it out of our face, because it's rather annoying when you have
Brill Cream wasn't in the Gemma Fay kit bag.
I don't think it's in many female footballers' kit bags, to be honest.
Right. Okay.
I can't speak for them all, but
you see, I thought it wasn't in many men's kit bags as well, but
it's obviously not in your kit bag, Phil.
No, it never has been, Gemma, never. John, personnel-wise, what do you expect we could see change for Hampden on Sunday, if anything at all?
I think we'll go to a back five. I think it'll be the 5-4-1. So I think I think Kenny McLean might drop for that for Kieran Tierney. I think Kieran Tierney will come in and play in the back five. I think Tierney was brought on. I know he was brought on to play wide. I think he was just brought on to get some minutes under his leg, because he'll be starting on Sunday. I'm not again.
Is that a danger, John? Sorry, moving back to the back five or back three, depending on how you want to say it, when we've looked solid with the back four?
I think when we're missing Ben Doak, we don't have wide players, and I think sometimes, although John McGinn is operated sometimes as a right midfielder and a 4 for Aston Villa, I think sometimes having centre midfielders as outside players is really detrimental to defending wide areas. You just get the same thing where they're obsessed with blocking the middle of the park, and I think that's probably why you've seen 39 crosses coming in from Greece. I know that is the way they play. They like to play. They like to get the ball wide. They like to rely on crosses into the box. But when you've got such a narrow midfield, it would be better to have another person in the box. And I think with the fear of Karatzis and how good he looked when he came on, I think the opportunity to double up with Kieran Tierney and Andy Robertson will be the thing that Steve Clarke looks at most fondly on that. That would be my way to stop it. I don't expect us to go and put on a performance like we did in the first half. I think this is a Steve Clarke special of seeing it out and letting Greece come on to us for 60 minutes and then try and hit them on the break.
Gemma, do you see any changes for Sunday?
I'd go along the same lines as John. You mentioned earlier, Phil, about slick football. I mean, at the end of the day, international football is about winning matches. Simple as that. It's not. You don't have time to next to this. It's about these are the players that we have at our disposal. What's the best system that I can put in place to achieve the goal of winning this match based on the outcome that I've got now? So we have a lead to defend, which is always quite nervous, to be honest. It's always nervous to defend the lead. But we have we have the ability, and we've shown it time and time again, to hit teams on the counter. And I think that the first and foremost, the way you don't lose a match is by conceding. So don't concede. And then from there, that forms a base to build. But I think the not conceding piece is not about sitting deep. That's the key thing here. The team has to be compact, cut off the passing lines between the team, force them to go wide, and we can defend in a 1v1, or we can even 2v1 in them at times. And then when we win that ball, get our strikers or our kind of higher midfield players on that ball, get the ball to McTominay so he can drive through that midfield. I think that's what you'll see.
Scotland against Greece, the second leg of the Nations League playoff match, with the winners staying in the top tier of the competition. Scotland take that 1-0 lead into the second leg on Sunday at Hampden. It's a match that you can watch on BBC Scotland TV. Of course, the best pictures is on BBC Radio Scotland. Look out for that one. Right, let's have a look at what's happening in the Championship with Scotland in action. The men's Premiership mothballed for the weekend, which means that we can focus on the second tier. It all kicks off tonight at Firhill with Partick Thistle hosting Wraith Rovers. John, from your point of view, Thistle were on this really dire run, but then they went and they beat Ayr last week. It's almost like the new bounce of the manager that some teams get and some teams don't. They're 7 points clear of Wraith. Sum up for me Partick Thistle so far this season. One of the teams that is always viewed as a potential promotion challengers and always gets to the playoffs and then just seems to begin to run out of steam at this time of the season.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, is I think Partick Thistle are never running with a big enough squad that they can compete with the likes of Falkirk. I think Falkirk and Livingston and Ayr have been not the surprise package, but I think Scott Brown's done an excellent job there to make them a challenger. But I think the biggest problem they have is they're probably just the best of the rest. Pushing for that. I think the surprise for Partick Thistle is that they've had no pressure from Airdrie this year. I expected Airdrie to be a bit closer to them, pushing for that playoff spot. I think they're probably in the right place, to be honest, for the squad they have, for the money they're spending, and the fact they've got rid of a manager and had to bring in people just now to manage it. I think they're probably in the place that I expected them to be. I expected Partick Thistle to be in the outskirts of the promotion playoff places. I think Morton have still got a decent chance of catching them, though. I think Morton have been really, really good. Morton have probably been the form side between December and February. It'll be difficult for them. I think last week's result was vital. But it will be interesting to see if Morton can pick up points with a game in hand and put pressure on them and reduce that to 4 points. It'll be a tough one. I can't really tell how that's going to go. I think Wraith are capable of going the run. I love the Scottish Championship, because it's 4 teams that go in this playoff. It's absolutely fascinating, and I think that the actual way the bottom of the table is setting up as well it's going to be really, really interesting. I think Partick Thistle will keep that 4th spot regardless, but I do think Morton will get within 1 or 2 points of them.
Yeah, so it's Partick Wraith tonight. Morton Queen's Park, one of the games tomorrow. Gemma, Queen's Park looking for a new manager, as is Dunfermline. The back pages this morning, one of them branding it an exclusive, that Neil Lennon being lined up to take over at Dunfermline, but then 3 other back pages are also going with the same story, although not with the exclusive banner. Neil Lennon making a return to football in the Championship with Dunfermline. How does that grab you?
I think Neil Lennon wants to make a return to football. I'm not sure Dunfermline in the Championship is where he wants to be, or even would be the most effective. If you look, I don't mean effective in terms of his coaching ability. It's not about that. If you look at the clubs that Neil Lennon has managed, it's a different type of club. So Dunfermline's not. I know they have aspirations, but you're sitting 9th in a Championship table. I'm not sure that Neil Lennon has necessarily the experience, unless I'm forgetting some clubs that he's worked with, to drive a team up a table from that position with the staff or the playing staff that he's got at this time of the season. I'm not sure what you would be expecting from Neil Lennon in that position. There's certain horses for courses. I'm not sure that's necessarily Neil Lennon's course. I could be wrong.
Ayr, I guess after last week, the best way to describe them is trying to get back on track with their promotion hopes at home to Hamilton. And then we've got top against bottom, Falkirk. The 9 clear at the top, John. Do we just hand them the title now? Or do you think that there's still mileage for them to be caught?
You never know. It's still football, but for me, Falkirk are the best team. They were my favourites at the start of the season to go up. Everything I've seen of them, even from the Ayr United game where they were 2 down, they're still my favourites. They're still the best football inside. Even when they went to Celtic and get gubbed in the League Cup, I couldn't believe how good they were on the press, how good they were playing out. I just think John McGlynn is like a very, very underappreciated, underrespected coach, and I think winning this title and getting into the Premier League, I think a lot of teams will see how good Falkirk are. I expect Falkirk to win this title. I can't see anything coming off. I think the signing of Scott Arfield has just been a kind of masterstroke for the club. It'll get them over the line. He's won titles before. He's won promotion with the club before. I expect him to hang on to that. I can't see a scenario in which Falkirk are shipping 9 points when they haven't over that spell of games.
Such a busy weekend ahead in the Championship. We've got the international side as well. Of course, in rugby, we've got the start of the Women's Six Nations. We've also got a domestic cup final to look forward to this weekend. That takes place tomorrow at Fir Park as Hibs take on Rangers in the Women's Premier League Cup. Gemma, a domestic cup final, always one that is to be savoured. I wonder if the scheduling works out even better for the women's game, that this is a match that isn't up against the Premiership, isn't up against an international game tomorrow. There's almost like there's a clearance there that it can come into its own.
Yeah, the challenge that everybody has in professional sport is trying to maximise broadcast opportunity in a packed schedule. And with the rise of professionalisation of women's sport, you kind of double down on that already busy space. So the fact that they've managed to find a time in the calendar where they can have focus on a cup final is a really positive step. It's a really, really interesting game. You've got Rangers, who are defending champions, but you've got Hibs, who currently sit top of the SWPL, 2 points clear of Rangers, are on a 10-game winning streak. And I mean, the last time they lost was in December. And this is the top of the SWPL table is kind of causing a bit of interest around Europe in terms of women's football because it's unpredictable. You've got 5 teams up there who are all capable of winning. Hearts, you could probably say, might be a little bit off it, but Hearts are just causing upsets left, right, centre. And the fact that Hibs are top of that, with the resources that everybody knows Celtic and Rangers have got, is blowing a few people's minds at this moment in time. You've got to take your hat off to Grant Scott in terms of the job that he's done there. It's been nothing short of phenomenal. Now, Hibs haven't lost to Rangers this season yet. They drew 1-1 with them, and then the last game they played against them in December, they absolutely thumped them 3-0. And I mean, it could have been 5 or 6-0. And I was actually speaking to one of the Rangers players yesterday, and it was quite interesting. I was trying to dig for a bit of information. Very kind of, on paper, they're the favourites, looking for a reaction, media trained within an inch of their lives. But
name some names, Gemma.
Yeah. No, I shan't name my sources, Phil. But I think, there's a chance, I think, that there's a new name on this cup this weekend. But you can't write off a Rangers team we found out this year, haven't we?
Right, so listen, give me a prediction and don't butter it up with, well, I might go on this side of the fence, that side of the fence. Who wins it, Hibs or Rangers?
Hibs.
John?
I think Hibs will win it. I seen Rangers play Queen's Park down at Broadwood at the start of the season, and then I seen Hibs play Queen's Park. Rangers won 10-0 and Hibs beat Queen's Park 7-0. But the thing that walking away for the game was the Hibs, this could end up being ridiculous come Saturday, 5 o'clock. Hibs looked like the better coached, better football inside, and Rangers were just littered with quote-unquote better players. And I didn't see how Rangers did it. Rangers will beat teams like Queen's Park, who are part-time with young players, heavily. And then I think now they're coming up against good coached sides in Scottish football. They're kind of trying to figure out what they do next. A lot of the goals in the Queen's Park game, for example, were like balls over the top and the pace of quicker, talented, stronger players. Hibs really impressed me when I seen them. That was a 7-0 that could have been 15. They were really, really good. And it was the same with the Hibs-Rangers game recently. I was so impressed with how Hibs play.
Yeah, it's a game that you can listen with us here at the BBC Radio Scotland. Sports Sound on air from 2 o'clock, following off the ball tomorrow. The cup final between Hibs and Rangers. We've got a domestic cup final. We've got league football in the men's game. We've also got an international for you on Sunday, all covered across the BBC. You won't miss a thing. My thanks to John Walker and to Gemma Fay this morning. Great to have you on, guys. Thank you very much indeed. We've talked haircuts, we've talked laser pains, and we've talked hugs and slop. I mean, you do get your...
No, Phil, you've talked about that. We haven't.
I do recall you saying one or two things about it. You've been peacocking around about your sources in the Rangers team, and you're not even giving their names away. I mean, we're dismissing this, Gemma. is missing it. Anyway, John Walker, Gemma Faye, thank you very much indeed. I got a text message from somebody earlier this week saying, Phil, why do you always remind people to turn on their notifications at the end of the podcast? Well, because it boosts our podcast reach, but also makes it so much easier for you, because you wake up in the morning, you jump in your car or on the bus to go to your work, and it's there for you. So click on the notifications. Or if it's your want, do the old-fashioned thing and just go to BBC Sounds and click on play. For now, though, enjoy the beautiful game, and we will speak again soon.
On BBC Sounds. From life aboard a Russian submarine to chairman of Hearts Football Club.
At this stage, he was the hero.
But as his controversial decisions escalated...
They said, we're going to sack George. And I'm going, you can't do this.
How did Vladimir Romanov go from Hearts saviour to a wanted man?
It caused a whole load of chaos and havoc.
Romanov, Tsar of Hearts. Listen now on BBC Sounds.